I got my wild cherry Diet Pepsi, and I got my blackjack gum here, and I got that feeling. Yeah, that familiar feeling that something rank is going down out there.
All right. Let's get fired up here.
Everybody knows that the dice are loaded. Rolls with their fingers crossed. Maximum freedom. Read.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom.
Stay on target.
Maximum freedom. Read Rothbard.
Hello and welcome to the Actual Anarchy podcast, the podcast where we talk about movies from a Rothbardian anarcho-capitalist perspective. This is brought to you by the fine folks from readrothbard.com. We also run actualanarchy.com. And today, we're going to talk about the movie Pump Up the Volume, the 1990 Christian Slater comedy, romance, heartthrob flick from way back in the day. It was so good that it made me think Cuffs was a good idea to watch afterward. That's a terrible movie, by the way. Robert is with me. How are you doing, Robert?
We're going to get your brothers and sisters. I don't know why, but we're going to come for your siblings. And that was a big song, and we're pumping up the volume. If you don't get that reference, it's from a song called Pump Up the Volume by Mars. And I had that little single record player. I'm talking a single. Okay, so it's a little piece of vinyl. It's a circle for all you young kids out there. And it had one song on one side and one song on the other side. And I don't even know what those are called. Probably like 45s or something like that. But it had Pump Up the Volume by Mars on it. And that was one of the few songs I had when I was like 9 years old. I don't know. Bringing me back, Daniel. Good job. Good selection. And we got a good guest for this one. Say hello to Nathan, everybody.
Yeah, we got Nathan Fraser. He runs Podcast Blast Off and the Free Market Squad. He has a podcast of his own, and he is way better at this than we are. But are you there, Nathan? How are you?
I am here. Am I coming through okay?
Yeah. You sound professional. You got like a professional mic and everything, right?
I do. I take podcasting a little too seriously. First of all, thank you for inviting me on. I do appreciate it.
Yeah, well, you're certainly welcome. We appreciate having someone to come on and talk about a movie such as this, where there's a guy running around doing his own radio, which we kind of all get to do these days, right? Like, it's sort of prescient that way. So,
yeah, absolutely. So, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, tell us a little bit about yourself, to the audience, so they know who they're dealing with, how they can find what you do, and all that stuff.
So, my name is Nathan Fraser. I'm a podcaster. I do a podcast called, egotistically enough, The Nathan Fraser Show. I'm also the owner of Podcast Blast Off. It's a podcast hosting and all-around podcasting resource for people to help get their podcasts off the ground. And I focus on, in my own podcast, I focus on liberty and libertarian themes, anarcho-capitalist, kind of. I don't know if I totally feel comfortable wearing that label, but I'm definitely an anarchist. I'm definitely a capitalist. And I'm a marketer, and so that's kind of what makes up the main content of the show. And then you mentioned Free Market Squad, which is just it's an online community for liberty-minded entrepreneurs, liberty-minded business owners, and liberty-minded marketers to kind of get together, encourage each other, share insights with each other, and help each other grow everybody's business together.
That all sounds great, and we'll post links to all of these things down in our show notes page. And so if anyone wants to find out any more information about what you do, they will have the means to do so. So thanks again for coming on. And,
yeah, absolutely. Thanks for inviting me.
Yeah, no problem. And, as everybody knows, the dice are loaded, right?
That's actually one of the songs that's in the movie that we're going to be talking about today.
Exactly, yeah. So in Pump Up the Volume, that is like the lead-in song for all of his pirate radio broadcasts. And I'm just going to peruse the wiki. I haven't seen this movie in quite a while. I know Robert hasn't either. Nathan, you have, so we're going to lean on you heavily, so thank you for doing that. But it stars Christian Slater. He plays a guy named Mark Hunter who recently moves to a suburb of Phoenix, Arizona. And he's kind of this shy dude in high school. You know, it's a new environment for him. He's not a jock. He's not any, particular in-group, out-group identity. So he's just kind of quiet. But at night, he's this pretty outspoken radio DJ type on this pirate radio broadcast that he does out of his parents' basement. And he opens every show with Everybody Knows by Leonard Cohen, who died rather recently. And he plays a bunch of, like pre-indie type stuff. I mean, this is all before Nirvana, right? So this is like the Pixies and Primal Scream, Soundgarden, Ice-T, Henry Rollins, those guys. But he starts to gain a following as his persona is Happy Harry Hardon, or Hard Harry, which is Triple H, which is related to the high school he goes to, Hubert Humphrey High School. And he gets popular and influential and starts getting people calling in, and one of the students who calls in ends up committing suicide, which is, of course, terrible. And Harry's not sure if he can go, back on the air, but then he decides to take it head on and actually deal with the issue. And he has this speech where he tells everyone, don't take the easy way out. You got to fight through this. High school is the worst part of your life, and it'll only get better from here. So you got to make it through this. And he gets, a bigger following related to that. But then he also gets the FCC after him for running an unlicensed radio station, and the police are involved, and he ends up uncovering a scandal at the high school, which we can talk about a little bit because I think that's kind of interesting. And then there's a chase where they're trying to triangulate a signal and shut him down, and he gets arrested at the end, but he inspires all the other students to, start their own show. And so all these other pirate radio broadcasts kind of spring up from that. So, Nathan, was that a fairly okay summary? I know you saw it a little bit more recently than me, so maybe you can add a little meat to those bones. And then I want to play a clip about the FCC and pirate radio by Murray Rothbard, which is about 5 minutes long, and that'll give us a jumping-off point into the rest of the show.
Yeah, it's actually it's one of my favorite movies. It's probably the biggest reason why I even started podcasting was the influence that movie had on my young, moldable psyche. And then when podcasting became available, I was like, oh, what that guy did is now possible for everybody to do. And you mentioned at the end of the movie how a bunch of people he gets arrested and everybody picks up the reins from where he was at and continues the movement. It's kind of like that visual image of a police officer trying to silence an idea by beating it, but what he's got a hold of is a dandelion, and by beating it, all he's doing is spreading the seeds of the dandelion. It's kind of like that. They take him down. They try to stop free speech by taking him down, but all it does is inspire the idea to spread like a virus, which was one of the themes of the movie that really succinctly gets summed up at the end. And I kind of feel like that's what podcasting is doing right now, is allowing people to get their ideas out there in a way that has not been possible before. So that's kind of why I make money off of podcasting, and I have a business that's focused around it. But it's really a passion for me because it allows people to get their ideas out there in a way that has not been possible before, and in a way that has been bottlenecked and censored, and is no longer that way anymore. So I'm pretty passionate about what I'm able to do.
Yeah, that's great. I just want to touch on the thing you said where, he gets arrested and they blow the dandelion seeds out into the air. That reminds me of that recent Antifa riots down in Berkeley where they're trying to silence Milo Yiannopoulos. claiming that he's a white supremacist, homophobe, even though he's a gay dude who dates black guys. But they tried to shut him down, and they, initiatory violence on their part. And then Milo becomes the number one search term on Google. Whatever his show shoots up the charts, his book sells really well. So it's exactly that. They try to silence him, they try to shut him down because they don't want his message out there, and then it explodes. The reaction is he gets way more coverage than he would have had they just sat at home and not messed with him.
Can I ask you a question real quick?
Sure.
Have you ever heard of the Barbra Streisand effect?
I've heard the term, but why don't you let us know what you're saying?
So there was a website that had a picture. It was like a Google Earth snapshot or some sort of satellite snapshot of Barbra Streisand's house. And it showed how lavishly she lived. It kind of went against her virtue signaling, and it showed where her house was at, what her house looked like, how luxurious her house was. And she didn't want it on the internet. The website that had it up was getting like 2 or 3 views per year. So she went to court, tried to shut them down, and all they ended up doing was drawing a bunch of attention to this website, and it went from getting 2 or 3 views per year to getting hundreds of thousands of views per day. And oftentimes in our zeal to shut ideas down or to shut points of view down, we end up just calling more attention to them. And I don't want to make this seem like only the left is guilty of this, because I saw the same thing happen with Netflix recently. Netflix has some new show based off of an old documentary or an old film called Dear White People coming out, and people that lean a little bit to the right in the liberty community just flipped out over this new Netflix show, and there was a whole boycott Netflix, and all it ended up doing was being a great piece of publicity for this new show that's going to be coming out, much like Milo Yiannopoulos and his book coming out, and people flipping out over how could this book company back a racist, misogynist, sexist, hate monger, and then all it does is push the book to #1 on their pre-orders. As human beings, we tend to, in order to fight against ideas we're not comfortable with, we tend to actually just feed those ideas. So I don't want to make it seem like only authoritarians are guilty of this. Even sometimes liberty-minded people fall victim to this same Streisand effect mentality.
Yeah, I think it shows how powerful it is to ignore ideas. I mean, there's a big debate in the anarcho world, at least that I see, where you either work within the system to reduce the power of government, or you just ignore it out of existence. I'm of the mind that everyone should just ignore bad ideas, like government is a bad idea. Just ignore it out of existence. Easier said than done. Of course, you need to get a lot of people on board. But when you end up fighting a bad idea like government, you end up, like you say, giving it more legitimacy, giving it more popularity, that sort of thing. People don't like to be forced into changing their mind. They tend to rebel against that, and rightfully so. They recognize force as immoral. So, yeah, and that's right.
Just a final note on that. As a marketer, I know that one of the most valuable resources is attention. People, and nowadays, attention is so scarce. There's so much out there, so many advertisements, so many different TV shows, so much real life stuff going on that's begging for your attention. As an advertiser, as a marketer, the number one thing that I need to get from people is their attention. And if you can get somebody's attention, if you can get somebody paying attention to you, that's half of the battle. And a lot of times, people don't realize that the way that they're fighting against ideas that they're not comfortable with or ideas that they don't agree with is by giving those ideas attention. And attention is a valuable commodity. So it's kind of like trying to fight a fire by throwing gasoline on it.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I remember, I don't watch a lot of TV, but I was watching the Super Bowl recently, and I watch it with some older relatives that I have. And, you know, they constantly remark, like, what are these commercials even about? These are just bizarre. They don't have anything to do with the product. And I'm like, well, they don't really care if they really make a whole lot of sense, so long as you remember that product name. If they caught your attention and you're thinking about Pepsi or whatever, or that car, that's all they care about. They don't care that the commercial actually makes sense, is coherent, is actually talking about the product's, you know, good points or anything like that. Sometimes they do, but more often than not, you're right. I think it's just pay attention to us. Keep us in your mind.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, hey, guys, I think this is a good a place as any to set the table for Murray Rothbard to talk about property rights in relation to the radio airwaves, because that's kind of one of the points of the movie is that he's running a pirate radio station. And he'll talk about how the FCC came about and kind of has a chilling effect. So it is actually one way to shut down free speech. And so, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Murray and Rothbard. This is a 5-minute clip, and then we'll be back right after this.
Well, now we have another area where the government doesn't allow private property ownership, in a sense overuse, I guess. Well, here the problem is a little bit different. But again, you have an area where the government does not allows the use of something, but doesn't allow property and the resource itself. And these are radio and TV channels. Again, you have a situation where radio was first invented. The question is, how do the courts deal with this whole question? Who owns what? And during the early 20s, when radio was first coming in, people are operating radio stations in Detroit at certain kilocycles and et cetera, et cetera. And somebody else would then beam something in the same kilocycle nearby. There'd be interference, and they went to the courts. And the courts would then could only decide on the basis of common law, which is basically libertarian. And they began to make decisions. The Illinois courts, for example, made decisions. Okay, here's what you do. The guy who homesteads, in a sense, in other words, the guy who first sets up his channel at 1,600 kilocycles or blah, 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 owns that kilocycle, or owns the right to beam out on that frequency. Then you have to find a technological unit. This is, you find it for 160 acres of wetland or for the oil pool. The technological unit is fairly easy to find out. It's a certain width, whatever the width of the band is, so you don't have interference, and the radius of the frequency beam is sent out. So you decide, okay, you have a 200-mile radius, let's say, and you own the 1,600 kilocycles within a band of plus or minus a certain number of kilocycles for this 200-mile period. And anybody who interferes with this is a transgressor and is aggressing against your property. You can take an injunction and smash them. Now, this is beginning to be developed in the early 20s. Now, what happens is that Herbert Hoover, now why he did this, I don't really know. Nobody, as far as I know, has investigated the infamous Radio Act in 1926, I think it was. Hoover decided there's a terrible things going on. People interfering in each other's radio channels. We can't allow this, and private enterprise hasn't worked in this area, and private property. Therefore, we have to nationalize the radio frequencies. He did, because he did not tell the rest of the country about the court decisions which were quietly going on at the same time. So Hoover, who was the Secretary of Commerce at the time, pushes through the Radio Act, which nationalized radio channels and later on, of course, TV channels. This means the channels all are owned by the government, not by private people. In order to be allowed graciously to use channel 1,600 kilocycles, you have to get a license from the Federal Communications Commission. And this means, of course, total totalitarian control over the media, radio and TV media. And it's a total suppression of free speech, free press, and I don't know why nobody seems to realize this, because, for example, the FCC requires so-called balanced news. For a long time, they didn't allow any editorials, because an editorial means somehow you're loading the dice. They demand equal time by every cluck who comes on with a certain point of view. So it's got to be balanced. It can't be this, can't be that, which really means if you take any kind of position at all, which is certainly any position which differs from the majority, you get clobbered by the FCC. The FCC doesn't renew your license. And this is complete totalitarianism. Supposing, for example, this applied to the press and magazines and books and newspapers. Supposing the government said, okay, from now on there's blah, 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 we have interference, there's scarcity of newsprint. That's another argument for nationalization, the fact that the radio and TV channels are scarce. Of course, everything's scarce, as we should know by this time. Every darn thing that's not free is scarce. So, newsprint is scarce, we nationalize everything. The government then nationalizes everything and then licenses people to be allowed to print stuff. Well, in that case, we would have a similar situation. Any newspaper steps out of line a little bit, a little too radical, a little too rambunctious. Your license is not going to be renewed, Buster. Of course, you have complete freedom of speech, but you can't operate without a license. You can't produce anything, you can't sell anything without a license. Now, this would be considered total totalitarianism, fascism of the worst sort. And yet, we allow the same thing to happen on radio and TV, and nobody protests about it. This is the exact same situation. There was, for example, a heroic libertarian radio station in Hawaii, not too long ago, an FM station, I think, which was quite popular, which was beaming libertarian broadcasts several hours a night, which then got clobbered by the FCC because of unbalanced reporting or whatever, and they threatened to take their license away, and they didn't have the money even to fight the legal fee to fight the license, so they just folded up. So this is just a small indication, but the thing is obviously it permeates. It has what the courts call a chilling effect on any kind of real freedom of speech in the media. And this is a direct result of nationalization. What happens is that the networks, for example, have this big bonus in the fact that they're allowed to use these channels for nothing. They don't have to pay any money for it, either to anybody else or the government or whatever. You have this peculiar situation where the networks are locked into a subsidy because they're getting the use of the channel free, and yet they have no real power over it. They have no power over what they say, etc. Of course, one argument technologically is that now with UHF and with FM, etc., and cable, there are a lot more channels. I mean, the range of channels has increased. But the principle is still there, the idea that you should nationalize something because it's scarce, completely justify any kind of collectivist except the air, which also has been collectivized anyway. So the government owns the air. We'll get to that in a minute.
Mic drop. It's Murray Rothbard laying it out there. A lot to unpack in that. What do you guys think?
For sure.
All right, and that's been our show, ladies and gentlemen. No, just kidding.
It's totalitarianism. It's absolutely control over what you think and say and do. What do you think, Daniel?
Well, watching the movie at the time, I thought it was a great, F you to the man. I was always kind of anti-authority, and I didn't really have a name for it. We were talking to Nathan pre-show a little bit about how we were kind of left-leaning at the time when this movie came out, just because it was like, it seemed like the Christian conservative right wanted to impose morality on us through the force of government, and so we were kind of against that idea. But now, of course, everything's flipped around, and now the left wants thought police, and you can't say this, you can't say that, but you must say this other thing, and if you leave anything out, we're going to be pissed. So this film, in retrospect, I think is even greater in my mind than it was at the time. I mean, like I said in the opening, it was a good enough film that made me think that watching the other movie that Christian Slater did after this, called Cuffs, thinking that watching that would be a good idea, which it was not. It was a terrible, terrible movie.
Isn't that like he's a cop and he's got like a dog partner or something?
It could be that. I know he's a cop. He's a young cop, and he's got some lady friend. I don't know if there's a dog or not. That might have been a Tom Hanks movie.
There was definitely a Tom Hanks movie with a dog, but something tells me there was a Christian Slater one with a dog too. I don't know. Anyway, go ahead. Yeah,
so anyway, I mean, now that I'm, full-fledged, like, ANCAP libertarian and, this clip from Murray, it's like, yeah, fuck the FCC. And fortunately, they don't have, like, control over us right now. I think if they got their net neutrality thing, they'd have some sort of jurisdiction over what we can say and not say on a podcast. But fortunately, we don't have that. So I think that's a good thing. I think that it is an inspiration to have people be able to go out and like Nathan was saying earlier, get your voice out there. You can pretty much say whatever you want. And getting attention, being controversial, is a great way to get that attention, right? That's half the battle.
So, if you don't mind, let's kind of unpack because this movie was made in the 90s, so it was a different political atmosphere. And like you said, back then it was the conservatives that were more about censorship and regulating the ideas that could be put out there. In the 90s,
right, yeah.
as far as I remember, there was Twisted Sister standing up against Congress trying to censor records. There was people buying CDs that they didn't like and setting them on fire and running over them with a steamroller out in front of record stores. There was very much this kind of like the rebellious teens that wanted to explore things that the conservative parents did not want being talked about, and that whole feeling was kind of packaged up into this movie. And so it was, I don't want to say it was left leaning, but it was definitely the libertine type of teenage rebelliousness against the stifled conservative type of mentality. And as a kid myself, when I watched it, that was very appealing to me. And it is weird that now the left has become the authoritarians. The left has become what attracted me to the left originally when I was younger was what they were fighting against, has now become what they embody. It's I don't know. Would you guys like to chime in and kind of give your thoughts on why we've watched this almost completely roll? It's almost like conservatism, and I'm not a conservative by any means, but it's almost like conservatism has become the counterculture now, whereas leftism used to be the counterculture.
Yeah, I think that's a big shift from with the whole left in the SJW culture coming out of the universities. They seem to be very government oriented and very establishment oriented, and use the mechanisms of government and power to get what we want. And the right is very much rebelling against that, rightfully so, because they want to be the PC police. They want to be controlling. What they used to do was get government out of our bedrooms, and now they want to force everybody to. I don't know. I mean, it's not a huge issue to me, but have transgenders in the bathrooms, and if you're saying bad words, you're the worst person in the world, as opposed to the people who mass murder people. It's a weird flip, and it's. I guess I've just been a rebel my whole life. Is that? It's just weird. I made this big shift from being a lefty to an anarchist, and I guess I just become more and more an extreme rebel the more I live.
Yeah,
what do you have to say about that?
That's a really good point you both bring up. And I remember there were Two Live Crew and NWA were getting in trouble for their lyrics, and I think Judas Priest was being brought into court for apparently their lyrics were telling people to kill people or kill themselves or something along those lines. And so, it was a backlash against that, that control, that thought control. And it did seem to be against the conservatives. And now, like you're saying, it is flipped around. It's really bizarre because there still are Christian conservatives out there, and I'm sure they still wish they could impose morality upon others. I think that they do that in some respects. But, I mean, I guess the bright side is that now that the left has shown themselves to be so regressive and not progressive, perhaps the people with the anti-authoritarian streak will now be attracted to an actual anarchy. ActualAnarchy.com, folks. Click on any Amazon link to support our site, Actual Anarchy. But, then we'll attract the people who have that streak in them, like libertarianism and being able to be free from third party interfering with what you want to do or what someone else wants to do, voluntary trade, transactions, free association, all of those things. Those are all great. And I think that, both sides of the continuum of the left and right have shown themselves to be against the individual doing what they wish to do. So it kind of leaves, we're the only other option left, right?
Yeah, and it seems like, I guess what troubles me about it is, throughout my life, I've kind of seen the gun being handed back and forth, and I've seen both parties just become completely abusive when they're the ones in control. When they've got their fingers on the trigger, all of the old arguments of we don't want to be oppressed and people shouldn't use government to force their ideals on other people, as soon as they're the ones with the fingers on the trigger, it seems like that whole ideology goes out the window. But tying it back to this movie, and the time period when it was, I mean, this was like, middle of, maybe the beginning of Bill Clinton, the end era of George Bush Sr., and these last 8 years with Obama, and what I'm kind of concerned about is now going into the next however many years with Trump. It's just been every single time that one party has been in control, they've just slowly gotten more and more abusive with that control. And as a reaction, when the pendulum swings the other way, it seems to swing even harder than the last time it was swinging that way. And, you know, I don't like to be the fearmonger. I don't like to be the Donald Trump is the next Hitler, because I think that's kind of a sensationalist, ridiculous argument to make. But some of the people that still buy into the left-right, still buy into we should be able to use government to force our opinions on others as a reaction to how abusive the left has gotten in the last however many years. I'm kind of concerned that there might be an equal and even maybe more momentous push the opposite direction. And I don't know. Do you think that I'm concerned for nothing in that, or do you guys kind of have concerns about that as well?
No, just to illustrate your point, you see it really vividly when the right is in power and all these small government Republicans just go silent. And then when the left is in power, all the anti-war left just go silent. As long as it's our team in control, then yeah, I don't have an issue with it. It's always railing against the other side, and there's no principle at play. It's just, well, government's fine whenever we're in power. It's really disgusting. Anyway.
Yeah, they're always horrified by what powers that were allowed to accrue under their watch is now transferred to someone else. So like all of the assumed powers that Obama accreted to the presidency is now being utilized by Trump, and that's one of the reasons why so many people are horrified, because they're like, oh my God, now he can do this. Well, it was okay when Obama did it, or when he created that, ability to do it, because every administration, it's always the encroachment, right? They can always set precedents for someone else to do it later, and it ends up biting these people in the ass. And it reminds me of, Nathan, you were talking about how this pendulum gets more wild and more violent swings. It's like when a certain type of dog walks across a bridge, and the cadence of the dog, the steps of the dog, get amplified as they go along, and the bridge starts to sway and sway and sway and sway more violently. And I think there was a bridge in New York or on the border somewhere with Canada where this bridge was particularly susceptible to this. And they would have people who would be watching for dogs and shoot the dogs to prevent the bridge from collapsing because of this effect that they would have on the bridge. I might be making this up a little bit, but I'm pretty sure if you Google it, you'll find something related to this, unless I'm just totally talking out of my ass.
So what you're saying is helicopter rides? No?
Helicopter rides?
Oh, you guys aren't deep enough into it, I guess.
Sorry.
It's okay. It's like on the control left, you've got when we're in power, we're going to put everybody in gulags, and then on the alt right, you've got when we're in power, we're going to be throwing people out of helicopters. You haven't seen that meme?
Oh, that's a Pinochet reference, right?
There you go.
Okay. Yeah, I've seen that reference in alt-right type stuff. I don't think we don't identify as alt-right. We identify as human freedom.
But it does. As somebody who stands for liberty, it does show that the extremes of on one side, people want to take people who don't agree with them and lock them up in work camps, and then on the other side, people want to take people who don't agree with them and throw them out of helicopters. And it's just like people like me stuck in the middle. That's like what the argument has kind of been degraded to is you don't think like us, we're going to stick you in a work camp, or you don't think like us, we're going to throw you out of a helicopter. And I don't know, man. It's scary that people go to those extremes, and it's not historically unprecedented. It has happened before.
Yeah, I don't know why it's just those two options. Like why can't there be, in my ideal world, just leave us alone? Let us go homestead or purchase an area, and then don't impose your will on us. But everyone else seems to think that, no, there must be a top-down authoritarian who controls everything. Like in my ideal world, the communists could go live in a commune and be commies, do whatever you want. And we have the right to self-defense. We'll protect ourselves if you impose upon us. But we're going to have a voluntary society over here. We're going to be Gulch Gulch. Why can't that be everywhere? It's this either or, and both ends of that spectrum are actually pretty terrible. Again, we're the third way, right?
Yeah, well, that brings up a lot of, and these are things that I kind of deal with in my own head as well, is like, I'm very much a propertarian, but I wasn't always, because I grew up very poor, and I grew up with a lot of the indoctrination of people that are rich and successful became that way by exploiting the working class, and government is there to keep everything in line, and if somebody has 5 houses, a house for each season, and then a winter or a vacation house as well.
Or a house on the lake like Bernie Sanders.
Yeah. That nobody needs that. Nobody needs that many choices of deodorant. I used to actually fall into that mindset and not having a lot of property and not feeling very valuable to the people around you. It's very easy to buy into that ideal. And so I can see why, if two sets of people both agree that government is probably not the best way to handle situations, people like myself who believe in capitalism, believe in meritocracy, we would say, well, okay, that's fine, but we do need to have property rights. We need to have established property rights. But on the other hand, people who don't feel like that, they're insecure about what kind of value they could provide for people. They're insecure about whether or not they could actually thrive in a meritocracy. They're not going to want property rights. They're going to want communal owning of everything. And so, like you said, you would like to see a world where if you want to get together with people and trade voluntarily, that's fine. And if other people want to get together and live communally in their own little compound or whatever, then that's fine as well. But people on the other side, and I'm saying this having spent most of my life as somebody on that other side, a lot of those people would say, well, yeah, but we can't get that land, and the fact that you trade is oppressive to us, and if you guys do better than we do, we have a right just by mere existence, and the fact that we don't respect your meritocracy, we don't respect your private property, we don't think the same way about property as you do, and by you not letting us come onto your property and enjoy the fruits of your labor, you're oppressing us. So where I agree that people should be able to do what they want to do and organize voluntarily the way that they want to, when it comes to the issue of property, one man's freedom is another man's oppression, and both of them feel justified in the way that they look at it.
Right, and you see that with the Antifa protests and the other Black Bloc type events where the communists will go around smashing store windows and say that it's rightful resistance against oppression, and say that it's not violence, but rather they're just self-defense. It's it's hard to see the principle at play, but you're right. It's a very incompatible. They're incompatible ideologies.
Yeah. So then that brings up the I guess inner dialogue that I have with myself, but I think is probably a rational dialogue that we should be having amongst ourselves is, what do we do when we say, hey, we just want to be over here trading voluntarily, and other people say your trade is oppressing upon us. The fact that you're not you're not willing to just voluntarily give us the fruits of your labor because we were born and we have a right to, because what it really comes down to is a lot of people, they claim and they probably believe that, that you can't own property, you can't own the earth. It's going to be here after you die. Just like, the argument over intellectual property rights. A lot of people consider physical property just as illogical to own as intellectual property, and that it's more of a mindset, and it's not so much these guys are bad guys. It's these guys see things differently, and because of the way that they feel, because of the value that they have or the faith that they have in themselves, because of as soon as an anarcho-socialist gets an inheritance from their rich uncle, they're probably not going to be an anarcho-socialist for very much longer. But up until that point, though, those ideas are totally justified. And in an anarchist society without the state, we're going to have to figure out some sort of way to deal with differing ideas. And when it comes to, that's really the hard line division is can people own property, or do people have the right to exercise control over a piece of property? When does abandonment occur? I mean, if you're not using your house except for once a year, have you abandoned it? If you don't use it except for every 3 years, have you abandoned it? When you drive to the grocery store to get groceries, have you abandoned your house? These types of things are questions that people don't agree on, and it makes me wonder, absent the state, would we find some sort of way to agree on them, or would we? And I'm definitely not I'm not a Hobbesian. I definitely don't think that without the state we would digress into our most primordial violent nature. But it does raise the question: how do we handle the conflict of ideas? And same thing with what we were talking about, free speech, and what's free speech and what's hate speech. These people that are anti-free speech, I don't really think that they see themselves as oppressors. I think that they see us as free speech people. And I don't agree with things that, a lot of the stuff I see on the alt-right side of the conversation, I wholeheartedly disagree with. But I am, and it used to be kind of a tenet of liberalism, is I don't agree with what you say, but I agree with your right to say it. But a lot of these kids, I don't think that they see themselves as anti-free speech. I think that they see themselves as, we're stopping the next Hitler, so, by any means necessary. And
by being literally the next Hitler.
Yeah. But
like we said, by using violence to try and stop an idea, all you do is fan the flames.
Yeah, but it comes down to, because the way they see the world, they feel justified in taking the actions that they take. And I don't think that that's going to go away just because we get rid of the idea of the state. I think that there's still a lot of work to do, I guess, is what I'm getting at.
Well, yeah. I think there's a lot to unpack in what you just said there, but I just want to make 2 points, and then I'll let Robert have the floor. I think that some of the stuff that you said is one of the reasons why the left and commies are against guns, right? Because that's, in the absence of the state, that's one of the means by which people would be able to defend their private property, right? And the other thing I wanted to mention was that that philosophy of, well, nobody should own anything, but you should give me the fruits of your labor, is really a philosophy of jealousy, right? And the irony of that is that those people who hold that mindset consider capitalists, or people who do voluntary trade and are successful, as being selfish, right? So it's totally opposite, right? You're selfish for looking out for your self-interest, but give me your stuff. Who's actually
not selfish to want other people's stuff?
Yeah, exactly. And so that's just one of the points I wanted to make. So the anti-gun thing, and then who's actually selfish. But Robert, you have the floor here. Nathan said a lot of stuff. So
yeah, Nathan said a lot of stuff, and he did made a lot of good points. It just brought up in my mind this idea of, being deserving, other people's stuff just for existing. It's really an argument against nature, because nature is, by its very nature, scarce. So you're basically arguing against scarcity. Like, just by existing, I should have sandwiches and a home and all this stuff because it exists somewhere. But there isn't enough for everybody because I don't have all that stuff. So it's an argument for, just because I exist, I should have all the stuff I want. As if all your dreams and all your wants should just be actualized and manifested just because you want them. It's really this childish mindset that I don't have to work for anything. I just have to exist, and it will be provided for me. It's like this continuation of the family unit where you're a child and all your wants and needs are met as you're growing up, not for having to work for it, just because you exist. And then you become an adult and you move out of the house, and all of a sudden you have to work for things. And you're like, what the fuck is this bullshit? This isn't right. This isn't fair. I was just getting everything just by existing, and now I'm not. So it's a really, I hate to just insult my opponents, but it seems to be this childish mindset of scarcity shouldn't exist, even though it does, so I'm being oppressed by nature. And because other things exist in the world that other people have created, I have somehow a right to that, even though I haven't contributed in any way. I just can't get behind that philosophy. I don't really understand the integrity of the philosophy. It seems to be, like Daniel said, a jealousy for other people's things. Not as if you're going to contribute to the world. You just deserve the world because you were born into it. It makes me think if this person was born on Mars all by themselves, they would just lay down and die because they couldn't create anything themselves, or they shouldn't have to create anything themselves. I struggle to see the merit in the philosophy is my main point.
Yeah, I agree. Like I said, it really comes from, in my opinion, it comes from insecurity. It comes from, like Dan said, it comes from jealousy and selfishness. But we have to understand, I think, I'm not trying to prescribe this, but being that I did come from that mindset, I just want to play devil's advocate for a second and think about like property rights in general. So on one side of the argument, you guys are fairly, I'm assuming you guys are fairly familiar with like the donut theory of property rights, right?
Yeah, but go ahead and explain it for the audience.
Okay, so the idea is I homestead some property, and then somebody else comes or I buy some property, however it may be. Somebody else comes and buys all of the surrounding property, thus leaving me inside of a donut. And so every direction that I go, I have to cross their property to get out to the world around me. So they can put up toll roads, or they can just put up a fence that blocks their property off, and I have no way to get over or under their property. And that's kind of where the slippery slope against property rights arguments come from. And a lot of people will say, even if it's not a donut, just the mere fact that I want to travel from point A to point B, and your yard is directly in the middle of the path that I want to travel, your concept of property rights is a direct violation of my right to travel. So I just kind of want to, I guess what I'm trying to get at is these people, and when I say these people, I wholeheartedly admit that I used to be of this mindset. I don't think a lot of these people they don't see themselves as the oppressor. They see us as the oppressor. They see us as the bad guys. They see our concepts of property as oppressive. And merely just letting them exist in their own little commune isn't going to change the way that they see us, isn't going to change the fact that they see us as oppressive, that they see our mindset as oppressive. And
Nathan,
so
if I could just interject just a second. this is on your line of thinking. Hopefully I don't interrupt you. But when you were from this mindset, did you believe that, like, property was theft? And how did you reconcile the fact that you owned things?
Well, and this is the thing, is I did not believe that property was theft. I did believe that profits were theft, though, and I don't believe that anymore. But I did believe that workers were exploited, and I did believe that we needed some sort of authoritarian power to stop rich people from getting too rich and to stop poor people from being too poor. Like I said, I was an anarcho-socialist. But I believed if the government was going to, I didn't believe the government was necessary or legitimate, but I believed if they were going to exist, that's the one function they should have, is to stop the rich from becoming too powerful and stop the poor from becoming too powerless. And I don't think that government is a proper way to handle it. I think that now, having exposed myself to broader ideas, I feel like free markets would actually do a better job of equaling out than government does. But the fact of the matter is I do understand that these kids that are going and burning down Berkeley, and these kids that are physically assaulting people for wearing Make Bitcoin Great Again hats, these kids don't see themselves as the bad guys. And so merely getting rid of the state won't end their desire to censor, because they don't see themselves as censors. They see themselves as warriors against hate. And so I feel like I guess my main concern is we have a tendency to just write them off as the anti-fascists or the actual fascists. We have a tendency to write them off as idiot kids. We have a tendency to write them off as cowards and black bloc property destroying idiots. But these kids actually see themselves as the heroes, and we all see ourselves as the heroes. That's part of the human condition, is we see ourselves as the good guys, and we see people who disagree with us as the bad guys. And while I agree that getting rid of the state would solve a lot of problems, I'm not sure that just letting or just assuming, let's just put people in there, let's let these people live over here to their mindset and let's live over here to our mindset. I'm not sure that actually would solve the problem of them not understanding. And for me, it took actually researching. It took starting my own business. It took understanding how much work goes into building a business and how much work goes into actually managing a business before I was able to. And it took watching my business being taxed and having those tax dollars used for things that I didn't want my tax dollars going towards. And it took, like I said, reading books like Hazlitt's Economics in One Lesson and realizing that price controls and just handing out welfare checks aren't solving the problem. It took communication. It took somebody putting out these works and being able to be exposed to these ideas for me to be able to move out of that mindset. And that's kind of why I'm so excited about podcasting, YouTube, and the ability to not have FCC regulating all of our communications. I think that communication is going to go a lot further than just dismantling the state, I guess, is kind of where my position is at.
So do you see the solution more along the terms of, in your own situation, education changed your mind? Do you see them just being a fundamental difference between people who respect property rights and those who don't? Or you see it as an education issue where these people can be reasoned with and educated?
I think that they can. I think that...
Not in camps, right?
Yes, re-educated in camp.
Yeah, no. No, I think that, and this is kind of where being a marketer comes into play. You have to learn how to communicate your ideas to people, because a lot of us on both sides of the aisle, the liberty versus the authoritarian, because really the two differences. I'm not really a left-right guy. I'm an authoritarian versus libertarian type guy. On both sides of the aisle, though, when we're trying to engage in conversation, we don't take into consideration where the other person is coming from. We just want to prove ourselves right. We want to lay out our logical arguments. And in advertising, in marketing, one of the things that they teach you, it's one of the very first lessons, is you have to join the conversation that's already going on in the other person's head. You have to meet them where your maps have overlay, where your worldview has overlay, and then work out from there. So we were kind of discussing before the call, whether you're on the left side or on the right side, all of us have issues where we oppose authoritarianism. We oppose the power of the state being used to force other people's opinions down our throat. Whether it's vaccines on one side where people say, hey, my body, my choice means I shouldn't be forcibly vaccinated. Whether you agree with vaccines or not, that's besides the point. Some people have issues with the school system and coercive education. Some people have issues with taxes being used for endless war. Some people have issues with taxes being used to perpetuate poverty and dependency on the welfare system. Everybody has certain issues, but we don't start with those issues and work outwards. At least most of us. I try to, because I found that to be much more effective. But a lot of us just start with, oh, you're an idiot, you're a fascist, you're a socialist, and we really start with a brick wall. And it's really hard. It's really hard to get somebody to agree with you at the end of a conversation if you didn't get them to agree with you at the beginning of a conversation. And that's why in advertising, the first thing that you want to do is let the person that's reading your advertisement or listening to your advertisement, you want to connect with them. You want them to know that you're on the same level as them, that you understand the problem that they're facing, or you understand that the desire that they're trying to get to, and then work your way out from there to where you get to the end of the conversation where you propose your solution. If you start out that conversation with a similar worldview or a similar mindset, by the time you get to the end of the conversation, you're much more likely to have them walk all the way there with you. But if you start off the conversation as, oh, you're just a commie, or, oh, you're just a fascist, there's no way at all that you're going to come to agreement as to the proposed solution, which in our opinion is getting rid of the state. There's no way that you're going to get them to that point if you start off the conversation by saying, oh, this is just a spoiled socialist, Starbucks window smashing black bloc protester, or, oh, this is just an alt-right neo-Nazi fascist pig.
Well said. Speaking, not to derail the conversation too much, but just having a marketer on, I just couldn't help but mention, have you heard the Bill Hicks tirade against marketing?
Yes, and I love Bill Hicks, and that's one of my favorite pieces of him, because I'm going to be straight up about it. There's a lot of truth in some of the anti-marketing stuff, but as a capitalist and as somebody who's a business owner, I also understand that if you've got something of value that you want to offer to people, you have an obligation to market it. You have to get the message out to people. The idea that build a better mousetrap and the world will beat a path to your door, it's not true. If you build a better mousetrap, you have to hire marketers to let the world know about it, or you're going to go broke. Yeah,
that's it's a struggle. It struggles. I like Bill Hicks a lot, but listening to that one and knowing I know about free trade and capitalism is a little bit hard. So I was wondering, so you actually enjoy that bit?
Yeah, as much as I find it insulting,
okay.
There's a little bit of truth to it. I mean, and this is the fact of the matter is a lot of marketing. It's a very thin line between manipulation and persuasion. And a lot of the tactics that marketers use can very easily be used to manipulate people. I guess the way that I look at it is, being a capitalist, being somebody that enjoys the spirit of capitalism, I believe that a free trade should end up in both people walking away improved. So
right.
I have $1, you have an apple, you value my dollar more than I value my dollar. You value my dollar more than you value your apple. I value your apple more than I value my dollar, so I give you the dollar for your apple. We both walk away feeling like we walked away with more than what we walked into it with. That's
whether there's a worm in there or not, right? It's ex ante. It's beforehand, right?
Yeah, exactly.
No one's guaranteed to be satisfied.
Yeah, well, I mean, unless you make a guarantee, unless the Apple sign when I go to your stand and the sign says guaranteed no worms in these apples, then we've got some beef. But I believe, as a marketer, I won't take on clients that I don't believe in their product. I won't help people market things that I don't believe will actually benefit people's lives. So, but a lot of marketers will. I see a lot of marketing where people get duped into things that if they had full information or if they understood what was going on, that they wouldn't buy into, and that people wouldn't be selling if the other person knew. So there's a lot of conning, there's a lot of manipulation that can happen. I basically say, if in your marketing you're bringing somebody to a position where they're appreciative of you convincing them to make the purchase, then you've persuaded. If you bring them to a point where they regret the purchase because you held back or you manipulated the information that they were able to get, then you're manipulating, and both happen in marketing. So whereas Bill Hicks only looked at the manipulation aspect of it and made a blanket statement about marketing from that point of view, there is another side to the coin, and I try to stay exclusively on that other side of the coin. But I don't deny that the reverse side is there, and I don't hate on Bill Hicks for exposing that other side either.
Okay, cool.
All right, so any way we can tie this back to the movie at all? Because we've been going almost an hour, I think, and ostensibly we're talking about Pump Up the Volume. So, any thoughts on that, guys?
You saw this recently, Nathan. Do you know if he's specifically charged with anything at the end of the movie, or do they just drag him away in handcuffs? And because isn't it not to legit justify it, but doesn't the FCC just fine you if you have a thing, or is it just kind of played up for the movie to have this big dramatic finale?
In the movie, I'm not exactly sure. The end of the movie is him and his girlfriend being ripped out of their Jeep and thrown in the back of a police van. Mm-hmm. And then as the police van is driving away, you hear all of the other pirate radio people start introducing their shows. So it kind of shows or visually paints the idea of you can't really kill an idea. All you can do is spread it by trying to beat it down. So it doesn't really make it clear as to what happens to him. But I guess kind of to tie it back to what we've been talking about, I don't know. I just am, as much as people get down about the times that we live in, and as much as doom and gloom gets prophesized, I just kind of have to look back at the fact that this conversation that we're having right now and the amount of people's ears that it'll get into never would have even been possible 20 years ago. So as much censorship and as much authoritarianism is still prevalent in our society, the free market has definitely figured out ways around those blockades to a point where now I think that the reason that we're seeing these social justice warrior type people reacting the way that they're reacting is because they've lost control of the narrative so much.
Yeah, that's a good point. Technology is always leading legislation, right? Regulation. And they had a stranglehold on the mediums of dissemination of ideas, and now they've lost that control. So of course they're, angered by that. But I think things like net neutrality, which has a very innocuous name and sounds like a good idea, would institute or implement a lot of that control mechanism that they so desire. And I think that these are all very good points that you brought up, Nathan.
And it's not just that either. Academia, you used to have to go to college and you used to have to get a doctorate or some sort of certification to be educated. And and this is going to be anecdotal. This is just my personal experience, but I'm a high school dropout. I dropped out of high school in the 12th grade, never went to college, completely autodidactic past that point. I've been able to study marketing. I've been able to study research advertising. I've been able to study and implement this knowledge into building websites, into building sales funnels for people, into building email autoresponder series, into how to make profitable business decisions. And now it's to the point where I can charge people $200, $500, $1,000 an hour just to talk to them and help them set up their businesses. And this is coming from somebody who dropped out of high school and didn't go to college.
Exploiter.
But the fact is they pay me because that $5,000 a month that they pay me turns into $15,000 or $30,000 for them. So, but I didn't have to go to college to get this information. I didn't have to go and bow before the throne of authoritarian academia to become successful in life. You can go on YouTube and figure out how to fix or create pretty much anything. You can go to Coursera, you can go to Udemy, you can go to lynda.com. You can go to my website and learn how to podcast and learn how to broadcast your message to the world better than a college course can teach you. So not just podcasting and YouTube, but the availability of things like Khan Academy, the free market, the ability to communicate has revolutionized the world. And I think that the reason that, touching back, and I don't want to beat up on SJWs the whole time, but they are a direct product of this old mindset of authoritarian academic, thought controllers. And that's not the way the world is going. And I think that these people are, the college professors and the politicians and the people that own the old dinosaur media, these people are terrified of what we've been able to do once we've been able to communicate. And I think that they see just as much as I see their grip on control of the narrative and the world in general is quickly releasing. And people like me, people like you, and all of these, it's so easy to start up your own business and get your message out there and change the minds of people that wasn't possible when this movie Pump Up the Volume was made. And they had us, the FCC had a way to clamp down and stop any kind of counter narrative from being out there. And that's just not possible nowadays. And as crazy as the world is, and as authoritarian as the left and even the right in some cases seem to be getting, I still hold out a lot of hope for the future as far as communications ability to impact and change the minds of people.
No, that's great. I've got a couple of points, two ironic and then a third. The first two are with the SJWs and the college professors and all of those folks calling out us as privileged when, in fact, they are the ones who are privileged enough to be as comfortable as they are to be able to worry about such things as which pronoun someone is using. Like they're not scrapping by like trying to get food. The wonders of capitalism have allowed them to rise to a level of their living standard being high enough to where they can actually go out and smash windows and they can worry about these kinds of things that really aren't, in my mind, significant issues to begin with.
They're so privileged. They're so privileged that the worst thing they have to worry about is microaggressions.
Right, yeah, they're so privileged that they're worried about your privilege.
Right.
For being a fucking white male.
And whether you're wearing, like, dreadlocks or something. Yeah.
Right, yeah. That's the other thing, right? They get it both ways. They're like, okay, they want this cultural diversity. We're better and stronger through diversity. But if you take anything from another culture and claim it for your own, then it's appropriation. They win both ways.
Yeah.
You know,
can always be outraged.
Only if you take them serious.
The privilege of outrage, constant outrage.
And then the other thing I wanted to mention, and this kind of ties back to, and you made great points about not wanting to just write them off. I think that I tend to want to do that because I don't feel like anything they say is going to change my mind at this point. Like, I feel like I've found something that is actually true, and they probably think the same thing. So, you know, unfortunately, I think they're wrong. But I wanted to bring up the point that even despite all the taxation that happens in the United States today, and the fact that the government tells them, hey, there's this program, that program, and these programs that are all helping people. So, in essence, you're already paying for something, you're being told that it's already going to help people, yet the American people are still the most giving when it comes to charity. So just imagine if you weren't told, hey, this is already being taken care of. Just imagine if you weren't already expropriated 30 to 40% of what you produce, income tax, business taxes, whatever. Just imagine what it would be like if those things weren't already like told to you that, hey, you're already paying for this and it's already being taken care of.
Well, just look at when Trump was elected, how the donations flooded into Planned Parenthood.
Exactly. That's a perfect illustration. Like, we need government funding for this. Then they just totally refute their own their own message, right?
By donating, yeah. Hey, we could do this ourselves, huh? There's a thing we care about, and we're going to do it ourselves, huh? Imagine that.
Yeah, imagine that. And then the last point, and this is one for you, Nathan. If you can guarantee me that there's no worm in this apple, I will gladly trade you $5,000 every month to bring back 10 or 15. I mean, I would do that all day long. So.
Okay. Well, we'll talk about that off of air then.
Very good.
All right. So why don't we start to wind this down? My wife just sent me a text saying that kid one's being an a-hole and she needs help. So final thoughts on the movie, and then Nathan will give you the floor for a moment to peddle your wares, and then we'll shut it down.
All right. You want my final thoughts on the movie first?
Yes, please.
Yeah, ladies first.
I told you my preferred pronoun is ze, zer, and they. I think that it's a great movie for free speech, and because of the time period, it's not really reflective of reality now. It's kind of completely the opposite. It definitely has a little bit of a left-leaning slant to the free speech arguments at the time, and now it's the conservatives that seem to be more about free speech, which is I guess watching it's hard to stay in the movie because of how much the script is flipped. But overall, though, I think it has a pretty awesome message, and like I said, it is the reason that I started podcasting. So if you haven't seen the movie, even though the role reversal kind of takes you out of it, it's still a really awesome movie to go back and watch.
Very good. I haven't seen the movie in a while, but it reminded me of a movie called The Fisher King. It's very recent, not recent. I don't know when Fisher King came out, probably like 2000s at some point. But there was also in that movie, there's a radio DJ who has kind of like a shock-jock guy. And one of his listeners would phone in and they'd have conversations, and, you know, he was talking about maybe committing suicide or something like that. And then he ended up committing suicide, and the DJ kind of spirals off into, you know, self-doubt and whatnot. I would just remind people that, the words you say have an effect on people, but at the end of the day, people have self-ownership, and they're responsible for themselves. So even if you go tell somebody that they should kill themselves, I mean, it's a terrible thing to say to somebody, but if they in fact do, you're actually not responsible for that. Yes, you may have contributed to their depression or what have you, but you're not necessarily responsible for their death, which is why we have this thing called free speech. So interesting parallel between those two movies, but the idea that someone is liable because he has a radio show and he's saying something you disagree with, or he says some mean thing, doesn't mean that they're the worst person in the world. The people that actually go out and kill people and commit physical violence, those are Those are the bad people. And that's my 2 cents. I wish I had seen it recently. I remember it being a very pro-freedom kind of a movie. And it's kind of in line. A lot of the movies in the 80s were kind of like pro-freedom, like Footloose. That was all about how, some town outlawed dancing. And the kids were all like, no, we're going to rebel and we're going to dance, man. Just watch us dance. And, so who knows? I mean, maybe we'll get more of those movies soon, but I've seen a SJW trend in Hollywood lately. Hopefully we're not going to get too much of that. Hopefully that kind of mindset will be beaten out by better ideas.
Well, you and I were talking offline a while ago about how Marvel's taken this SJW turn, and now all the superheroes have turned into women somehow, and their profits are just dropping off like a rock, and so that's going to eventually affect what they do, right? That's going to change the direction. Like that's the beauty of the capitalist system. That's profit and loss. You do something people like, you're going to make money. You do something they don't like, guess what? You're not going to do it much longer.
That's right.
I think I also just recently read something, because I'm also a huge comic book nerd. I just read something recently that Marvel is taking the market hints, and they're saying that after they're done with the recent runs that they're doing, that they're going to start backing off of using their platform to shove their political ideology down the throats of their readers, because really they're marketing ideas to people that are just not the ideal. SJWs aren't buying Marvel comics, so using it as a platform to push those ideas to an audience that has no need for them, it's just a bad business model. Yeah, you're proselytizing to people that have no interest in what you're saying, and these are the people that are buying or usually buy your books. So it was a weird turn. It's almost like they're trying to virtue signal that they're the progressive comic book company and that you should accept these ideas. But people don't necessarily like to be preached to in their entertainment all the time. So, I'm glad that they're facing a market pushback. Oh, God. Oh. So Nathan, tell us where you're at, what you do. Daniel. Oh, Daniel. Oh, my goodness. For people that have watched the movie recently, that'll be really funny. Well, my circle of friends used to call that having a champion for years afterwards, and I never knew where it came from, or maybe I did know at one point and then I'd forgotten. But Daniel reminded me of that just last night, so thank you for that, Daniel. Yeah, I think it's a great, fun movie, and rewatching it now is really great. It's actually moving up the charts in my top list of movies. Even just having this conversation made me think it's better than previously thought. Cool. It is. Like I said, I went back and rewatched a bootlegged version of it on YouTube the other night, and I was just like, oh man, I forgot how good this movie was. Sweet. So go check it out, everybody. Yeah, do you mind if I... Yeah, go ahead. I was just going to say, let's wrap this up, and Nathan, let us know how to find your wares. Let the audience know more about you. Okay, cool. So my podcast is called The Nathan Fraser Show. You can find it at nathanfrasershow.com. If you're interested in starting a podcast of your own, I have a website called Podcast Blast Off. It's got lots of tutorials, lots of blog posts, a free course that people can find out about how to set up and start their podcast. I approach podcasting from a very business-minded point of view. So most of the course is about marketing principles and how you can use them to make your podcast as successful as possible. So if success in the podcasting realm is something that you're interested in, definitely check out Podcast Blast Off. And then I also run a online community of liberty-minded business owners, marketers, and entrepreneurs. And if you want to find out more about that, you can go to freemarketsquad.com and find a bunch of pro-free market capitalist business materials there as well. All the exploitation you could ever want. Right there, folks. So, hey, thanks for joining us. This has been the Actual Anarchy podcast. We run actualanarchy.com and readrothbard.com. Feel free to click on the tip jar link. We got a Patreon page at patreon.com/readrothbard.
or click on any of the Amazon links, purchase any of the goods that you desire from those exploiters over there at Amazon at the good prices, best service you can get. Somehow people are upset about that. ActualAnarchy.com, ReadRothbard.com. This is Daniel saying, Robert, final word.
Thank you so much for joining us today, Freedom Nerds. Thank you to our guest. It was a fantastic discussion. Come back again. We'll have more stuff, more analysis of maybe forgotten gems in your movie-watching past that you can watch again with a new perspective. Take care, everybody.
And don't forget, talk hard.
The Chipmunks. CHIPMUNK. We're the Chipmunks. Guaranteed to brighten your day. Do 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 do.